Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Get started. So for those of you that aren't familiar with NetSuite, we were actually the first cloud business application software company ever founded way back when in 1998. And when we started on this journey, no one thought that mission-critical cloud-based applications would ever be successful. Today, of course, the cloud is one. People can't get to the cloud fast enough, whether it be our applications or your applications, business and consumer. It's been pretty amazing to see happen over the last 20 years. In our case, just some proof points, we're on a $1 billion revenue run rate this year, and by far the fastest growing of any ERP system. Only ERP system in the top 15 that's pure cloud-based. This is Gartner's most recent market share data, growing at 46% a year. If you look at the last 3 to 4 years, you'd see the same sort of picture where cloud-based NetSuite just destroying the competition, and poor SAP, negative 12%. I always feel bad about putting that up there, but I'm required to do it. But this is telling you where customers are voting with their money. The future is in the cloud. But I would argue the cloud is not just the next disruption, it's the last disruption in the computer architecture landscape. We started at mainframes, disrupted by client server. Now we're at the cloud. There is nothing after the cloud from a computing standpoint, from an architectural standpoint. After all, what's after all of your information, business and personal, available on any device, at any time, anywhere? There's basically nothing. But not only is it the last computing architecture, it's also the last business architecture. And this is really the fundamental transformation that I think has happened over the last 5 years. When you talked about cloud computing over our history, most people viewed it as a technology company thing. Technology companies were cloud companies. Now every company on the planet is a cloud company. And the first time I made this observation, I was in Manila, and I was trying to think of the most absurd business moving to the cloud just to prove my point. And being from the Midwest of the US, a lot of cattle ranching going on there. I said, well, if you're a cattle rancher, you're a cloud business. And one hand shot up in the audience in Manila. The guy stood up, said he's absolutely right. I'm the only manufacturer of Kobe beef in the Philippines. I've got all my cattle instrumented in the field. I know where they are. I know what their temperature is. I know if they're sick. They call back into NetSuite, tell us all this information. It was just another example of basically how the cloud was transforming a business completely unrelated to technology, the cattle industry. And so I think where we're heading, in addition to this being the last computing architecture, this is really the sort of last economic architecture that we'll see in our lifetime. And I'd like to talk about a few of the rules related to the cloud economy. These are the things that I think, as you build your companies, whether they're cloud-based technology companies or just businesses in general, these are the concepts you have to take into account as you build your technology company or any type of business today. The first is embedding algorithmic intelligence into your system. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Secondly, what's happening, a lot of companies here are born on the cloud. You wouldn't think of doing anything but building your products on the cloud, running your business on the cloud. But for the vast majority of established businesses that are out there, they have established business models. They're product companies, they're services companies. Now they have to figure out how to become a cloud company. And so hybrid business models are beginning to emerge in the traditional businesses that were born 20 years ago. And last but not least, you have to be able to figure out how to adapt to change. The fundamental underpinning, I think, of the cloud is how rapidly things change. This is going to be a continual disruption. So while the cloud is the last computing architecture, that doesn't mean things will change. In fact, things are going to change all the time on top of that architecture. So talk a little bit about algorithmic-driven intelligence. We were really a first-generation cloud company, so we didn't take into account the power of all of the data we would be aggregating. But if you look at second-generation, third-generation cloud companies, they're building into their business model the idea of how do you mine all that data you're bringing together. That's really what's going on in these companies and in our companies today. So if you look at all of these, Facebook, LinkedIn obviously has aggregated all of the world's resumes, but that wasn't their goal. Their goal was to aggregate all of the data in your resumes so they could do things with it, sell it to companies like us, When we go looking for CFOs of wholesale distribution companies in China, sell it back to you, here's jobs you should look at. So algorithmically driven intelligence in LinkedIn. Amazon obviously was an early starter in this. Very simple things, people like you also bought this. Obviously algorithms driving those sorts of things, heavy algorithm intelligence there. Tesla, I just bought a car, I was just in a Tesla. There are some giant computer screens in these cars. Believe me, they're going to be selling you things in these cars, whether it's based on what's happening in your car, what your proclivities are, where you're going, what you're driving by. They're aggregating all that data to do things with it and sell you things. In our case, as an example, even though we didn't begin the company with this idea of how do you mine data, we're certainly doing it today for a variety of purposes. And we have 30,000 companies around the planet using our software today. And what's interesting is this is probably the world's largest aggregated database of business data anywhere on the world. Anywhere in the world. And this is just some information, give you an idea of sort of the data aggregation within NetSuite that we have the opportunity to look at and do things with. This is just in the last year. 150 million new items added by our customers into our database, into the inventory modules. $150 billion of orders processed in the last year. 2 million services projects managed in the last year. 20 million purchase orders, buying things in the last year. 186 million invoices in the last year. This is by far the largest database of business data anywhere on the planet. 4 million unique quarterly logins across this, so we're seeing incredible user activity. And last but not least, and this is the thing that really blew me away, every day, NetSuite's customers add 9 trillion bytes of information into our data store. 9 terabytes of data of business activity added on a daily basis. So this is the kind of stuff we're looking at to mine. For example, what features should we add next in the product? Our customers are telling us what they need and what they need next, even though they don't know it. What trends are happening across businesses through this data? Our customers are telling us this, even though they don't know it, we can see it. So as you begin to build your cloud applications, whether you're a technology company or a non-technology company, you have to build this notion of, first of all, aggregating data, and then secondly, figuring out what you're going to do once you aggregate that data. The second rule of the cloud economy is to embrace hybrid business models. And so one of the things we've learned as we've looked across that 9 terabytes of data that's added every day is there is a fundamental change happening in the business models of companies. Historically, standalone businesses have been pretty simple to run. You had product companies, and they dealt with things like suppliers and orders and inventory and warehouses, bill of materials, margins, very discrete business model elements to running a product business, a manufacturing business, or a distribution business. Separate from that was services companies. Totally different business model, dealing with non-inventory types of items, humans, utilization, time, resource management, scheduling, very different set of business processes. And then companies like NetSuite came around and we turned products into services. We basically sort of merged these business models of physical product being delivered as a service, and you had to deal with a whole new set of metaphors: subscription, churn, renewals. So all of these used to be discrete businesses. What's happening in the world today as the world moves to the cloud is that all 3 of these business models are merging. So suddenly things become very complex for running businesses in the cloud. You have to be a product company, you have to understand products, you have to understand services, and you have to understand products as service. And not just understand them, you have to deal with the vagaries of managing your business and managing the aspects of all of these different types of business models. And where the big problem is popping up and where we've seen it pop up in our customer base is in the billing system, and for those of you that are CFOs, in how revenue is recognized. Billing is getting incredibly complex in the product as service world. Customers are expecting you to manage all 4 of those items and invoice them properly for it. What's the worst CRM experience there is? Getting the bill wrong. Suddenly the invoice becomes very complex. You have products on that invoice, you have services on that invoice, you have subscriptions on that invoice. No system is really designed to manage that complexity. The second thing related to that, and this is actually a verification that this trend is actually happening. Accounting standards boards have recognized this trend as well and changed the revenue recognition rules for how you turn those invoices into revenue. And this was really caused by Apple and Cisco back in around 2010 timeframe. Apple would sell a phone, and the accounting rules would make them recognize that phone as a subscription over the life of the subscription. Apple didn't want that. The hardware had a physical cost. They wanted to recognize the hardware today and recognize the life of the software over the subscription. So new accounting rules were set up to deal with that product-service combination. And now, as every company becomes a product and service company, every company has to deal with these complex rev rec challenges. So it's not just about billing, it's about turning that billing into revenue, incredibly complex. This is the biggest challenge of running these hybrid business model businesses. Oh, and by the way, you have to do it in every currency around the globe, every currency, every tax convention in the cloud generation. So this is incredibly complex from a back office management standpoint. And the final challenge of adapting to the rules of the cloud economy is you have to be able to adapt to change. And this is really obviously a key driver of all of our businesses today, as traditional software, the hallmark of traditional software is it can't adapt to change. You change it once and then you never want to touch it again. You can't do that in the modern economy. You have to be able to change your business as your business model changes, and your business model is going to be changing all the time. And in fact, this is the Fortune 500 rate of decay of turnover in the 500 companies in the Fortune 500, and you can see the rate of decay is accelerating. It used to, in 55, it took 37 years for half of the companies to vanish. In 95, it took 15 years for half the companies to vanish. I think when we look at it again in 2016, it will be halved again. So this is really the rate of change, a good example of the rate of change and how it's affecting the world's largest companies. And the thing I would have you take away today, and certainly it's been important in our business, is that to enable companies to manage this change and to change their business practices as the world changes, you have to enable your cloud-based system to be customizable. And what most people have thought about cloud-based software is it's not customizable. And the reason they think that is, for example, in NetSuite's case, everybody is on the same version of the software, and therefore people extrapolate that to say, therefore no one can change that application. Every company who runs on NetSuite has changed the application. We built customization into the first iteration of the product. And I would advise you, if you're building cloud software, especially business software, the key to business is being able to change your business application as your world changes. And really, there were only two companies that figured out this problem, how to enable customization of a shared application platform. Salesforce.com did it. They call it Force.com. That sort of customization architecture evolved into an actual application development platform. We solved it very similarly for a different set of problems. We have something called Suite Cloud, which enables exactly that. You can actually build applications natively on top of our core business application. So if you think customization is a dirty word in cloud applications, you're not going to be very successful. And it's this customization capability that enables companies to change their business process as the world changes. And really the things that are happening out there as you look at large companies and small companies, what the large companies in the world are trying to do with these types of applications is to try to act small, to try to move nimbly, to change their business model, to experiment with new business models. And you look at what some of these companies are doing. Cosmos Supply Lab, great manufacturing company. Actually, they're here on the floor. They make all of the accessories for the iPhone that Apple sells, deployed NetSuite in about 6 months from a manufacturing perspective. Hong Kong Express, another small startup acting big, deployed us in 6 months. And Jollibee, this is another great example of large companies acting small. Obviously, they have huge installed base in the Philippines. When they decided to come to China, when they decided to go to Vietnam, they didn't do it on their old, unchangeable platforms. They did it on a platform like NetSuite. So incredible speed. This is exactly what large companies are trying to accomplish. And then finally, the hallmark of where NetSuite has always performed is the kind of application we were trying to build and the kinds of applications that you're trying to build are enabling small companies to act big. No longer do you need massive infrastructure to run these businesses. And in fact, most of you who were born on the cloud, this is how you run your business today. You go grab NetSuite, you go grab Salesforce, you go grab some other application, and you're up and running overnight versus the traditional model. And in fact, you probably have better systems in place than, and I know you do, you have better systems in place than the world's largest companies because you're on these next generation applications. And if you just look at the world of startups, certainly in North America, certainly here, they're all basically born on NetSuite. And there's a reason for that. Part of it is a great application, but more importantly, you need the speed, the agility to grow these businesses very quickly. So from Snapchat to Daiquiri to Tableau, every IPO in the Dropbox, you name it, every company founded in the last 10 years has been built on a platform like NetSuite, not a platform like SAP or Great Plains for obvious reasons. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much. Appreciate your time.